Jake Morrison stood on his office balcony and watched the sun rise over the golden wheat fields. The morning air smelled sweet and clean. Far below, farmers were already working in their fields. Huge machines moved slowly through the crops, gathering the grain that would feed millions of people across human space. Haven's Rest was a good place to live. Jake had been the colony administrator for 8 years now. He loved this world. The planet had perfect weather, rich soil, and clean water. Over 2 million humans called it home. They grew enough food to supply 20 other colonies. Jake walked back into his office and poured himself coffee. The morning report sat on his desk. Crop yields were up 15% this year. The new irrigation system was working perfectly. Crime was almost zero. Everything was going well. His assistant, Kelly Brooks, knocked on the door. She worked in communications and always brought him the daily news from Earth and other colonies. Kelly was young, maybe 25, with short, brown hair and bright eyes. She had grown up on Haven's Rest and loved the planet as much as Jake did. "Good morning, sir," Kelly said. "I have the overnight messages from Earth. Nothing urgent. The transport ship Golden Harvest is coming next week to pick up grain. Captain Williams sends his regards." Jake smiled. "Good. Any word from the other farming colonies?" "New Texas reports a good harvest. Eden Prime is having some trouble with insects, but nothing serious. Oh, and there's a message from your daughter on Earth. She says the university is going well." Jake nodded. His daughter Emma was studying to be a doctor. She wanted to come back to Haven's Rest after graduation to help people. Jake was proud of her. The morning passed quietly. Jake met with the Farming Council to discuss next year's planting. He reviewed budget reports. He approved plans for a new school in Riverside City. It was normal work for a normal day on a peaceful world. Type C. Lunchtime, Jake ate in the cafeteria with other government workers. They talked about their families, their work, and the upcoming harvest festival. No one was worried about anything. Why would they be? Haven's Rest had been safe for 30 years. Security Chief Lisa Wang joined Jake at his table. Lisa was tough and smart. She had served in the Earth military before coming to Haven's Rest. She kept the peace with only 200 security officers for the whole planet. Crime was rare because people were happy and had good lives. "Everything quiet today?" Jake asked. Lisa nodded. "Very quiet. A few traffic accidents. One bar fight in New Springfield, but nothing serious. Our biggest problem is teenagers racing their vehicles too fast," Jake laughed. "Could be worse." "Much worse," Lisa agreed. "I served on frontier worlds where we had real problems. Haven's Rest is paradise." After lunch, Jake returned to his office. Kelly was at her desk monitoring communications from across the star system. 3 small moons orbited Haven's Rest. Each had a communication station to relay messages to other worlds. The system was far from any major trade routes, but it was peaceful and safe. At 2 o'clock, everything changed. Kelly's face went white. She stared at her screen with wide eyes. Her hands shook as she typed commands into her computer. "Sir," she called out. "Sir, you need to see this right now." Jake hurried to her desk. On the screen was a radar display showing the space around Haven's Rest. 40 red dots had appeared at the edge of the system. They were big dots. Very big. "What are those?" Jake asked, though he already feared the answer. "Ships, sir. 40. Large ships. They're not responding to our signals. They're not human ships. The computer says they're warships." Jake felt his stomach drop. In 30 years, no alien ships had ever come to Haven's Rest. Humans had contact with several alien races, but most were peaceful traders. Some were neutral, a few were hostile, but they stayed far away from human space. "Can you identify them?" Jake asked. Kelly's fingers flew over her keyboard. "The computer is running analysis now. Wait. Oh no. Sir, these are Zeltharian ships. The computer confirms it. 40 Zeltharian dreadnoughts." Jake knew about the Zeltharians. They were a powerful empire that ruled 12 star systems. They had fought small wars with human colonies before, but always in disputed territory. Haven's Rest was deep in human space. It was not disputed territory. "Get me Captain Taylor right now," Jake ordered. Captain Ben Taylor commanded Haven's Rest's small defense force. He had 3 patrol ships and maybe 60 crew members total. They were meant to stop pirates and smugglers, not fight a real war. Taylor's face appeared on the screen. He was a good man, about 40 years old, with gray hair and worried eyes. "Administrator Morrison, I see them on our sensors. 40 ships. We're completely outgunned. Can we evacuate the planet?" Jake asked. "Not in time. We have cargo ships and passenger transports, but they can't move 2 million people quickly. Maybe we could save a few thousand." Jake closed his eyes and thought hard. He was responsible for every person on Haven's Rest. 2 million men, women, and children. Farmers, teachers, doctors, shop owners, good people living peaceful lives. "Try to contact the alien ships," Jake ordered. "Ask them what they want." Kelly worked at her console. After several minutes, she looked up. "Sir, I have a response. It's coming through the translation computer now." A harsh alien voice filled the room. "Human colony and system designation Kepler 442b. This is Admiral Krickstall of the Zeltharian, 3rd Fleet. You are in violation of galactic territorial agreements. You have 24 hours to evacuate all human presence from this system. Any humans remaining after that time will be destroyed. This is your only warning." The message ended. The room was silent. Jake stared at the screen. "Territorial agreements? What territorial agreements? This system has been human territory for 30 years. Kelly checked her computer files. "Sir, I can't find any agreements giving this system to the Zeltharians. According to our records, we have full legal claim to Haven's Rest." "It doesn't matter," Captain Taylor said quietly. "Legal or not, we can't fight 40 dreadnoughts with 3 patrol ships. We need to start evacuating immediately." Jake looked out his window at the peaceful city below. Children were playing in parks. Farmers were working in fields. People were shopping and working and living normal lives. They had no idea that death was coming from space. "Start the evacuation," Jake said. "Get as many people off-world as possible. Begin with children and families." "What about you, sir?" Kelly asked. Jake straightened his shoulders. "I'm the administrator. I stay until the last ship leaves. That's my job." Over the next 24 hours, Haven's Rest became a nightmare of panic and fear. Ships launched constantly, carrying refugees to safety. But there were not enough ships. There was not enough time. Captain Taylor took his 3 patrol ships to meet the alien fleet. Jake watched on his screen as the tiny human vessels approached the massive Zeltharian dreadnoughts. It was like children fighting giants. The battle lasted only minutes. The human ships were brave, but they had no chance. Captain Taylor died along with all his crew, buying a few extra hours for the evacuation. Then the aliens began bombing the planet. Jake stayed at his post as long as possible. Kelly stayed with him, sending final messages to Earth and other colonies. "Haven's Rest is lost," she transmitted. "They came without provocation. Remember us." The last thing Jake saw was a bright flash as the alien weapons struck his building. He died thinking of his daughter on Earth, hoping she would understand why he could not abandon his people. By the end of the second day, Haven's Rest was silent. The farms were burning, the cities were ruins. 2 million humans were dead. The Zeltharians had made their point. They left as quickly as they had come, confident that humanity would learn to fear them. They were wrong. The news reached Earth 3 weeks later when the cargo ship Morning Star jumped into the Sol system. Captain Rodriguez had been delayed by engine problems, which saved his life. He arrived at Haven's Rest 2 days after the attack to find only burning ruins and radioactive ash. President Maria Santos was eating breakfast in the White House when her aide brought her the message. She read it twice, then set down her coffee cup with shaking hands. 2 million people, gone, murdered by aliens who claimed humans had no right to exist on their own world. "Get me the Federation Council," she said quietly. "Emergency session. Now." Within 6 hours, representatives from every human nation and colony gathered in the Great Assembly Hall in Geneva. The room could hold 5,000 people. Today it was packed. Senators, congressmen, prime ministers, and colony governors filled every seat. The air buzzed with worried voices speaking dozens of languages. Admiral Nick Foster stood at the podium. He was a big man with gray hair and steady eyes. He had served in the Earth Defense Force for 30 years. He had seen combat before, but nothing like this. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Foster said, "I will show you what happened to Haven's Rest." The lights dimmed. A huge screen lowered from the ceiling. The first image showed Haven's Rest from space as it had been, green and blue and beautiful. Cities sparkled like jewels. Orbital stations moved in perfect formation. The second image showed Haven's Rest after the attack. The planet was brown and black. The cities were craters. The orbital stations were twisted wreckage. No lights, no movement, no life. The assembly hall fell completely silent. 5,000 people stared at the screen in shock and horror. President Santos stood up. How many survivors? None, Madam President. Our ships searched for 6 days. The aliens used nuclear weapons and biological agents. Nothing survived. Not even plants or animals. Senator Paul Green from Texas jumped to his feet. This is genocide, pure genocide. We must respond immediately. Representative Linda Carter from California shook her head. We need to be careful. We don't know how powerful these aliens are. Maybe we should try diplomacy first. Diplomacy? Senator Green shouted. They killed 2 million innocent people. Children. Babies. What kind of diplomacy works with monsters? The argument spread through the hall. Some wanted immediate war. Others wanted to try peaceful solutions. The debate grew louder and angrier. President Santos raised her hand for silence. There is someone here who can speak for the Zeltharian Empire. Ambassador Thekmore, please come forward. A tall alien walked to the podium. Thekmore looked like a giant lizard walking on 2 legs. His skin was dark green with yellow spots. His eyes were cold and black. He had been the Zeltharian ambassador to Earth for 5 years. Most humans thought he was reasonable and peaceful. Today, he was different. Today, he showed his true nature. Humans of Earth, Thekmore said in perfect English. The Zeltharian Empire regrets the loss of life at Haven's Rest. However, your species must understand galactic law. You have expanded beyond your permitted zone. You occupy 17 worlds that belong to the Zeltharian Empire. What permitted zone? President Santos demanded. We signed no treaty limiting human expansion. Haven's Rest was ours for 30 years. Thekmore's black eyes glittered. The Zeltharian Empire does not recognize human claims to territory. Your species is young and weak. You will learn to respect your betters, or you will face the same fate as Haven's Rest. The assembly hall erupted. Representatives screamed in anger. Some tried to rush the stage. Security guards had to protect the alien ambassador from 5,000 furious humans. You will evacuate the 17 disputed worlds immediately, Thekmore continued, his voice rising above the noise. You have 6 months. Any humans remaining after that time will be destroyed. The Zeltharian Empire has spoken. Senator Green pointed at the alien with shaking finger. Get out! Get out of our building! Get off our planet! Thekmore smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. As you wish. But remember, humans, Haven's Rest was just an example. We can destroy Earth just as easily. Choose wisely. The alien ambassador left the hall surrounded by security guards. The assembly fell silent again, but this time the silence was different. This time it was the silence of cold, hard anger. President Santos returned to the podium. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but her voice carried to every corner of the huge room. My fellow humans, she said, we face a choice. We can surrender our colonies and live as slaves, afraid to expand or explore. Or we can fight. We can show these aliens that humanity does not bow to threats, that we protect our own no matter the cost. But they destroyed one world easily, Representative Carter said. What if they destroy Earth? Then we die free, President Santos replied. But I don't think they can destroy Earth. I think they're bullies who pick on small, weak targets. I think they made a mistake when they chose to fight humanity. Yes. Looked around the room, meeting the eyes of representatives from every human nation and colony. Humanity has never been united before. We've fought each other for thousands of years. We've had wars and conflicts and disagreements. But today, we face an enemy that wants to destroy us all. Today, we must stand together. Fleet Admiral Carl. Davis stood up in the military section. He was even older than Admiral Foster, with white hair and scars from a dozen battles. Madam President, what are your orders? President Santos's voice was quiet but clear. Admiral Davis, you have full authority to mobilize every military unit in human space. Every ship, every crew, every weapon. If the Zeltharians want war, we will give them war like they have never seen. What about the cost? Asked Prime Minister Chen from the European Union. Mobilizing our entire military will bankrupt us. Money means nothing if we're all dead, President Santos replied. Besides, this isn't just about the military. This is about survival. Every human nation, every colony, every corporation must contribute. We fight together or we die separately. Over the next hour, the representatives voted. Earth's military forces mobilized. The European Union fleet mobilized. The Asian Coalition Navy mobilized. The African Federation Defense Force mobilized. The Mars colonies, the asteroid miners, the Outer Rim settlements, all mobilized. But it wasn't enough. Even combined, human military forces numbered only about 50,000 ships. The intelligence reports said the Zeltharians had over 200,000. We need more ships, Admiral Davis said. Military vessels aren't enough. President Santos nodded. Then we don't just mobilize the military, we mobilize everything. Cargo ships, passenger liners, mining vessels, research ships, anything that can mount weapons or carry troops. Civilian ships can't fight dreadnoughts, Admiral Foster protested. No, but they can carry soldiers. They can transport supplies. They can serve as support vessels. And if we arm them properly, they can fight too. President Santos looked at the massive assembly one more time. The message goes out today to every human world, every human ship, every human citizen. We are at war. Not just the military, but all of us. Every person who can hold a weapon, every ship that can fly, every factory that can build ammunition. She paused, then spoke the words that would be remembered forever. The Zeltharians think they can terrorize us into submission. They think killing 2 million innocent people will make us afraid. They're wrong. Every human who died on Haven's Rest will be avenged. Every child, every farmer, every teacher, every worker. We will make them pay for every single life. The assembly rose as one. 5,000 people from dozens of nations and hundreds of colonies stood together. For the first time in human history, every nation on Earth and every colony in space was truly united. The call goes out today, President Santos continued. Every ship that can fight will fight. Every person who can serve will serve. We will build the largest military force in galactic history, and when we're ready, we will show the Zeltharians what happens when you genocide human beings. As the representatives filed out of the assembly hall, Admiral Davis was already working on his plans. Wolf 359 would be the gathering point. It was a star system with plenty of space and good defensive positions. Ships would come from across human territory to assemble the greatest fleet ever created. The Zeltharians had destroyed one human colony. Soon they would learn the price of that mistake. Humanity was going to war, and this time, humanity would not lose. 6 months after the declaration of war, Wolf 3M59 had become the busiest place in human space. What started as an empty star system was now home to the largest gathering of ships in galactic history. Every day, more vessels arrived from across human territory. Commander Susan Lee stood on the observation deck of the orbital command station and watched the endless stream of arriving ships. As logistics coordinator, she was responsible for organizing the massive fleet. It was the hardest job she had ever done. "Status report," she said to her assistant, Lieutenant Tony Garcia. Tony checked his tablet. "We're at 680,000 ships and still counting. The European Union sent their final squadron yesterday. The Mars Defense Fleet arrived this morning. We're still waiting for ships from the outer colonies." Susan shook her head in amazement. When Admiral Davis first announced the gathering point, military experts said it was impossible. No one had ever tried to coordinate so many ships in one place. The logistics alone seemed overwhelming, but somehow, humanity was making it work. The ships came in every size and shape imaginable. Massive Earth battleships floated next to tiny asteroid mining vessels. Sleek Mars cruisers shared space with converted cargo haulers from the rim worlds. Passenger liners had been stripped of their luxury fittings and packed with weapons and armor. "What about the civilian ships?" Susan asked. "How many have we converted?" "About 400,000 so far," Tony replied. "Engineering teams are working around the clock. They're mounting missile launchers on cargo ships, adding armor to passenger liners, turning research vessels into electronic warfare platforms. If it can fly and carry weapons, we're using it." Susan watched a massive grain hauler slowly maneuver into position. The ship was 3 times longer than a battleship, designed to carry food between colonies. Now it bristled with missile tubes and railgun turrets. It looked strange, but intelligence reports said it could fight as well as any purpose-built warship. "Any word from Captain Warren?" Susan asked. Captain Steve Warren commanded the battleship Retribution, one of Earth's most powerful warships. He was also serving as Susan's military liaison, helping coordinate between civilian logistics and military operations. "He's meeting with the international fleet commanders," Tony said. "The last groups are arriving today." As if summoned by their conversation, Captain Warren appeared on the observation deck. He was a tall man with dark hair and serious eyes. He had fought pirates and raiders for 15 years, but nothing had prepared him for this massive undertaking. "Commander Lee," he said, "Admiral Davis wants to see you in the command center. The final fleet tallies are ready." Susan followed Captain Warren through the corridors of the command station. The halls buzzed with activity. Officers from dozens of nations worked side by side, planning the greatest military operation in human history. Communication specialists coordinated with ships across the system. Intelligence analysts studied Zeltharian positions. Supply officers tracked food, fuel, and ammunition for nearly 750,000 vessels. The command center was a massive room filled with screens and holographic displays. Admiral Davis stood at the center, surrounded by fleet commanders from around the human sphere. Susan recognized Admiral Rachel Dubois from the European Union, Admiral Kim Tanaka from the Asian Coalition, and Admiral Moses Okafor from the African Federation. "Commander Lee," Admiral Davis said, "I need your final logistics report." Susan activated her tablet and projected the numbers onto the main screen. Total fleet strength, 743,891 vessels. Of these, 89,000 are purpose-built military ships. The rest are converted civilian vessels. The room fell silent as the officers absorbed the numbers. It was the largest military force ever assembled by any species in galactic history. "Personnel?" Admiral Davis asked. "Approximately 200 million humans across all ships and support roles. Every nation and colony has contributed. We have crews from Earth, Mars, the asteroid belt, the rim worlds, and even the research stations." Admiral Tanaka stepped forward. "What about supplies?" "Ammunition for 6 months of intensive combat. Food for 1 year. Fuel for 18 months. Medical supplies for casualties up to 15% of total personnel." Admiral Okafor nodded approvingly. "And intelligence?" "On the enemy?" Helen Price, the chief intelligence officer, activated her own display. "The Zeltharian Empire controls 12 star systems. Their total military strength is estimated at 180,000 to 220,000 ships. Most are concentrated around their homeworld and 3 major industrial systems." "So we outnumber them almost 4 to 1, Captain Warren observed. "In ships, yes," Helen replied. "But their vessels are purpose-built warships. Ours is a mixed fleet, with many converted civilian vessels. The actual combat capability ratio is closer to 2 to 1 in our favor." Admiral Davis studied the tactical displays. "It's enough. More than enough. The question is coordination. Can we actually control a fleet this large in combat?" "We've divided the fleet into battle groups of 10,000 ships each," Susan explained. "Each battle group has its own command structure and objectives. The quantum communication network allows real-time coordination across the entire fleet." "What about the enemy's likely response?" Admiral Dubois asked. Helen activated new displays showing Zeltharian territory. "Intelligence suggests they don't know the true size of our fleet. Their spies report significant military buildup, but nothing close to actual numbers. They're expecting maybe 50,000 to 100,000 ships at most." "Good," Admiral Davis said grimly. "Let them underestimate us. It will make our job easier." Over the past 6 months, humanity had shown capabilities that surprised even itself. Factories on Earth worked 24 hours a day producing weapons and ammunition. Shipyards on Mars launched new vessels every week. Mining stations in the asteroid belt provided raw materials at unprecedented rates. But the most impressive thing was the unity. For the first time in human history, every nation and colony was working toward a single goal. Old enemies had become allies. Competing corporations shared technology freely. Rich worlds helped poor colonies build ships and train crews. "There's something else," Susan said. "Morale reports from across the fleet She activated a new display showing survey results from thousands of ships. The numbers were remarkable. Crew satisfaction, 97%. Confidence in mission success, 94%. Willingness to fight, 99.8%. They remember Haven's Rest, Captain Warren said, quietly. Every human in this fleet knows what we're fighting for. Admiral Davis nodded. 2 million innocent people, farmers, teachers, children, murdered for no reason except alien arrogance. That's what drives us. The meeting continued for 2 more hours as the commanders refined their battle plans. The strategy was simple but effective, overwhelming force applied with precision and coordination. The Zeltharians had superior individual ships, but humanity had superior numbers, better logistics, and absolute determination. As the meeting ended, Admiral Davis made a final announcement. Fleet departure is scheduled for tomorrow at 800 hours. All ships will jump to Zeltharian space simultaneously. The attack begins immediately upon arrival. The commanders filed out to return to their ships and prepare their crews. Susan remained on the observation deck, watching the vast fleet prepare for departure. Maintenance crews worked frantically to complete last-minute repairs. Supply ships made final deliveries of food, fuel, and ammunition. Transport vessels ferried personnel between ships. Tony Garcia joined her at the viewing window. Hard to believe. We actually did it, he said. 700,000 ships. It seemed impossible 6 months ago. The impossible becomes possible when you're fighting for survival, Susan replied. The Zeltharians thought they could terrorize us into submission. They thought killing one colony would make us afraid. She watched a squadron of converted passenger liners practice formation flying. 6 months ago, these ships had carried tourists and business travelers. Now, they carried weapons and warriors, ready to bring justice to the aliens who had committed genocide. They're about to learn something about humanity, Susan continued. We don't forget. We don't forgive. And we don't abandon our own. Across the system, nearly 750,000 ships prepared for the largest military operation in galactic history. Tomorrow, they would jump to enemy space and deliver humanity's answer to the destruction of Haven's Rest. The Zeltharians had made one terrible mistake. They had underestimated what humans would do to protect each other. They were about to discover that humanity's capacity for war was as vast as its capacity for peace. The fleet was ready. The crews were ready. All that remained was to show the galaxy what happened when someone made the mistake of committing genocide against the human race. Admiral Krixtal stood on the bridge of his flagship, Death's Claw, and watched the sensors with growing confusion. The displays showed impossible readings. Ships were appearing at the edge of Zeltharian space, but the numbers made no sense. Tactical. Officer, he growled in his harsh voice. Report. Admiral, sensors show approximately 700,000 human vessels entering our territory. The readings must be wrong. Perhaps it's sensor interference or some kind of electronic warfare. Krixtal's cold eyes narrowed. He was the same alien who had destroyed Haven's Rest 6 months ago. He commanded the Zeltharian home fleet from the capital system. His forces included 80,000 of the Empire's best warships. Run full diagnostics on all sensor arrays, he ordered. 10 minutes later, the tactical officer returned with the same report. Admiral, diagnostics confirm the readings. There are 743,891 human ships in our space. They're arranged in battle, formation across 7 star systems. Krixtal felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Not for himself, but for his empire. The humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to be afraid. Their largest fleet actions had never involved more than a few thousand ships. Open a channel to the human fleet, he commanded. On the other side of the battlefield, Admiral Davis stood on the bridge of his command ship, Vengeance. The massive vessel was surrounded by nearly 750,000 other ships, stretching beyond the horizon in every direction. It was the most beautiful and terrifying sight in galactic history. Admiral, his communications officer reported. We're receiving a signal from the Zeltharian flagship. Put it on screen. Admiral Krixtal appeared on the display. He was tall and reptilian, with dark green skin and black eyes. He wore elaborate military decorations and carried himself with arrogant pride, but Davis could see something new in those alien eyes. Uncertainty. "Human Fleet Commander," Crixtall said. "I am Admiral Crixtall of the Zeltharian Imperial Navy. Your presence in our territory is an act of war. Withdraw immediately or face destruction." Admiral Davis stepped forward. He was an older man with gray hair and steady hands. He had served in the human military for 40 years. He had fought pirates, raiders, and hostile aliens. But this was different. This was justice. "Admiral Crixtall," Davis replied in a calm, clear voice. "I am Fleet Admiral Carl Davis of the United Human Forces. 6 months ago, you destroyed the colony of Haven's Rest. You murdered 2 million innocent civilians without provocation or warning. Today, you face the consequences of that act." "The humans on that world were trespassing on Zeltharian territory," Crixtall replied, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Haven's Rest was a human colony for 30 years. Your people had no claim to that system. You committed genocide against innocent families, farmers, teachers, children. You killed them all." Davis paused, then spoke the words that would echo through galactic history. "You destroyed one human colony. Today you learn the price of genocide against humanity. Surrender now, or face total annihilation." Crixtall's expression changed from uncertainty to rage. "You dare threaten the Zeltharian Empire? We have ruled this region for 1,000 years. Your pathetic species is barely out of its home system." "And yet," Davis replied calmly, "we brought 743,891 ships to your door. How many do you have, Admiral? 200,000? Less?" For the first time, Crixtall seemed to truly understand what he was facing. The human fleet was so large that it filled multiple star systems. Even his best estimates had never imagined humanity could field such a force. "This is your last chance," Davis continued. "Surrender your fleet and submit to trial for war crimes. Your people will be relocated but allowed to live. Refuse and we will destroy every military asset in Zeltharian space." Crixtall's reply was to cut the transmission and open fire. The Battle of Zeltharian Prime began when 40 dreadnoughts fired their main batteries at the human fleet. Massive energy beams and nuclear missiles streaked through space toward the advancing human forces. But Admiral Davis had prepared for this moment. The human fleet was not a simple formation. It was a carefully orchestrated machine of war, designed by the best military minds in human space. "All units," Davis broadcast across the quantum communication network, "execute Plan Alpha. Remember Haven's Rest." The response was immediate and overwhelming. The first wave of human ships, 50,000 fast attack vessels, accelerated toward the Zeltharian positions. These were converted cargo haulers and passenger ships, armed with missiles and railguns. They weren't as tough as military vessels, but they were fast and numerous. Behind them came the heavy units: Earth battleships, Mars, cruisers, and European Union dreadnoughts advanced in perfect formation. Their weapons were fewer in number than the converted civilian ships, but each shot was precisely aimed and devastatingly effective. Captain Lisa Park commanded the destroyer Vengeance, one of thousands of military vessels in the attack. She had trained for this moment for 6 months, studying Zeltharian tactics and weapons. Now she led her ship and crew into the largest battle in human history. "All weapons, fire at will," she ordered. "Target the nearest enemy dreadnought." Her ship's missiles streaked toward a Zeltharian heavy cruiser. Around her, hundreds of other human ships fired simultaneously. The alien vessel disappeared in a cloud of explosions and debris. Wing Commander Dan Roberts led a squadron of fighters launched from converted passenger liners. His pilots came from a dozen different worlds, but they flew with perfect coordination. They had trained together, fought together, and now they would win together. "Blue Squadron, target the enemy flagship's weapon systems," he commanded. "Red Squadron, cover our approach. Remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for every human who died on Haven's Rest." The fighters dove toward the Zeltharian flagship, their weapons blazing. Enemy fire filled the space around them, but they pressed on with grim determination. The battle raged for hours, but slowly the outcome became clear. The Zeltharian fleet was skilled and well-equipped, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. For every human ship they destroyed, 10 more took its place. Admiral Kriegstahl watched in growing horror as his fleet was systematically destroyed. His proud dreadnoughts, each one a masterpiece of Zeltharian engineering, were being overwhelmed by swarms of human vessels. Some were obviously civilian ships, hastily converted for war, but they fought with the same determination as the military units. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we've lost 60% of our fleet. The humans are advancing on all fronts. Our defensive positions are collapsing." Kriegstahl looked around his bridge. His officers were all staring at him, waiting for orders. They had served the Zeltharian Empire faithfully for years. They had conquered weaker species and enslaved entire worlds. But today, they faced an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. "How many human ships have we destroyed?" he asked. "Approximately 12,000, sir. But they still have over 700,000 vessels in combat formation." Kriegstahl closed his eyes. He had made a terrible mistake. When he destroyed Haven's Rest, he thought he was teaching humanity a lesson about respecting superior forces. Instead, he had awakened something that should have remained sleeping. "Sir," his communications officer said, "the human flagship is hailing us again." "Put it through." Admiral Davis appeared on the screen once more. His expression was cold and determined. Behind him, the bridge of his ship was busy with officers, coordinating the largest military victory in human history. "Admiral Kriegstahl," Davis said, "your fleet is broken. Your defenses have failed. This is your final opportunity to surrender and spare the lives of your remaining crews." Kriegstahl looked at the tactical display. His fleet was indeed broken. Burning wrecks drifted through space. His proud flagship was surrounded by human vessels, their weapons trained on his bridge. "What are your terms?" he asked quietly. "Unconditional. Surrender. All surviving Zeltharian military personnel will be taken prisoner. Your government will be dissolved. Your species will be relocated to a single world under human supervision. War crimes trials will be held for all officers involved in the genocide at Haven's Rest. And if I refuse," Davis's expression didn't change, "then we will destroy every Zeltharian ship, station, and military installation in this star system. Your choice, Admiral." Kriegstahl looked around his bridge one more time. His officers were waiting for his decision. Outside, the largest fleet in galactic history was prepared to complete the destruction they had started. "I surrender," he said quietly. Across the human fleet, a cheer went up from nearly 200 million voices. They had done it. They had avenged Haven's Rest. They had shown the galaxy that humanity would not tolerate genocide against its people. But Admiral Davis did not celebrate. He was already thinking about the next phase: occupation, trials, and the establishment of a new galactic order where human colonies would never again face unprovoked attack. The Battle of Zeltharian Prime was over. Humanity had won the greatest military victory in galactic history. But more importantly, they had proven that when humans stand together, no force in the galaxy can defeat them. 1 year after the Battle of Zeltharian Prime, President Maria Santos stood in the ruins of Haven's Rest. The once beautiful farming world was still scarred from the alien attack, but signs of new life were everywhere. Construction crews worked to rebuild the cities. Farmers planted new crops in soil that was slowly healing. Children played in parks that had been rebuilt from radioactive ash. Commander Beth Wilson walked beside the president, pointing out the progress that had been made. Beth had volunteered to oversee the reconstruction of Haven's Rest. She wanted to honor the memory of the 2 million people who had died here. "The main city will be finished next month," Beth explained. "We're calling it New Haven. The memorial will be at the center, with the names of every person who died in the attack." President Santos nodded. The memorial was important to her personally. Her own nephew had been among the victims, a young teacher who had moved to Haven's Rest to help educate the children of farmers. His name would be carved in stone forever, along with 2,299,147 others. "What about the trials?" Santos asked. "Admiral Kriegstahl was sentenced to life imprisonment yesterday. 53 other Zeltharian officers received various sentences for war crimes. The rest of their military personnel are being held on Kepler Station until the relocation is complete." The trials had been broadcast across human space and beyond. The galaxy watched as humanity demonstrated both justice and mercy. The aliens who had committed genocide were punished, but ordinary Zeltharian civilians were treated with fairness and respect. "Where are they being relocated?" Santos asked. "A world in the Tau Ceti system. It's similar to their original homeworld, but much smaller. About 200 million Zeltharians will live there under human supervision. They'll be allowed to govern themselves as long as they remain peaceful." Santos looked across the landscape of Haven's Rest. In the distance, she could see new farms stretching to the horizon. The soil was rich and fertile again. The lakes and rivers ran clean. Life was returning to this world that had seen such terrible death. "Any word from the other alien governments?" she asked. Beth smiled. "That's the interesting part. We've received diplomatic messages from 47 different species. They all want to establish friendly relations with humanity. Some are offering trade agreements. Others want mutual defense pacts. They're afraid of us now. Very afraid. News of our victory spread quickly. The story gets bigger every time it's told. Some aliens think we have 1,000,000 ships. Others believe we can destroy entire star systems." Santos laughed quietly. "Good. Let them think we're more powerful than we are. It will keep the peace." The two women walked toward the memorial site. Construction workers were installing the final panels of black stone, each one carved with thousands of names. At the center stood a simple inscription: "They died as free humans. They are avenged." "The dedication ceremony is next week," Beth said. "Families from across human space are coming to honor their loved ones." "I'll be here," Santos promised. "Every human leader will be here. We owe them that much." As they walked, Santos thought about the changes that had swept through human civilization in the past year. The war against the Zeltharians had united humanity in ways that centuries of diplomacy had never achieved. Old enemies had become allies. Ancient conflicts had been forgotten. For the first time in human history, Earth and all its colonies truly stood as one people. The economic changes had been just as dramatic. The massive fleet that had conquered the Zeltharians was being converted for peaceful purposes. Military vessels became exploration ships, searching for new worlds and new resources. Converted cargo haulers returned to their original roles, carrying trade goods between the colonies. The war economy had become a peace economy, but one that was stronger and more unified than ever before. "What about our military strength?" Santos asked. "Are we maintaining the fleet?" "We've kept about 200,000 ships in active service," Beth replied. "The rest have been converted back to civilian use or placed in reserve. But if we ever need them, again, we can mobilize the entire fleet within 6 months." Santos nodded approvingly. The lesson of Haven's Rest must never be forgotten. Humanity had learned that peace required strength, and that strength required unity. They reached the memorial site just as the sun was setting. The black stone panels gleamed in the golden light. Workers were putting the finishing touches on the central monument, a tall spire that could be seen from orbit. "There's something else," Beth said quietly. "We've had contact from 3 different species that want to join a human-led alliance. They're offering to place their fleets under our command in exchange for protection." "From what?" "From other, aggressive species. Apparently, the galaxy has several empires like the Zeltharians. They prey on weaker civilizations, conquering and enslaving them. Our victory over the Zeltharians has given hope to species that thought they were helpless." Santos considered this carefully. When humanity had first reached the stars, they had dreamed of peaceful contact with alien civilizations. Instead, they had found a galaxy where the strong dominated the weak, where genocide was considered acceptable policy. "What do you think we should do?" she asked. "I think we should accept," Beth replied. "We've proven that united free peoples can defeat any tyrant. Maybe it's time to spread that lesson across the galaxy." As they stood before the memorial, Santos made a decision that would shape the future of galactic civilization. Humanity would not be content to simply defend its own colonies. They would become the protectors of freedom and justice throughout the stars. "Draft a response to those species," she ordered. "We'll consider alliance proposals, but our terms are non-negotiable. We protect free peoples. We do not tolerate slavery, genocide, or unprovoked aggression. Any species that joins our alliance must commit to those principles. Yes, Madam President. Santos looked up at the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, other species were watching and waiting. Some hoped for human protection, others feared human power. All of them had learned the same lesson that the Zeltharians had learned too late. Humanity had arrived as a major galactic power. They had proven their strength in the largest battle in galactic history. They had shown their justice in the trials of war criminals. They had demonstrated their mercy in the treatment of defeated enemies. But most importantly, they had proven something that no other species had ever managed, that different groups could unite as one people when faced with a common threat. Humans from Earth, Mars, the asteroid belt, and the rim colonies had fought side by side. Old enemies had become allies. Ancient hatreds had been set aside. The dedication ceremony will include representatives from all human colonies, Beth said. Earth, Mars, the European systems, the Asian colonies, the African territories, and the rim worlds. For the first time, every human leader will stand together in one place. As it should be, Santos replied. We are one people now. We were forged in the fire of war, but we will build a future of peace. As they walked back toward their transport, Santos thought about Jake Morrison, the colonial administrator who had died defending his people. She thought about Captain Ben Taylor, who had taken 3 small ships against 40 dreadnoughts. She thought about Kelly Brooks, who had stayed at her post to send the final warning to Earth. Their sacrifice had not been in vain. Their deaths had awakened something in humanity that had been sleeping for too long. The understanding that humans must stand together or fall separately. The memorial would honor their memory forever. But the greatest monument to their sacrifice was not made of stone. It was the unity of human civilization, forged in war, but dedicated to peace. Years later, when alien historians wrote about the rise of humanity as a galactic power, they would identify the Battle of Zeltharian Prime as the turning point. But they would also note something else. Humanity's response to the destruction of Haven's Rest had changed more than just military balance. It had changed the moral foundation of galactic civilization. No longer would strong species prey on weak ones without consequence. No longer would genocide be considered acceptable policy. No longer would aggressive empires expand without opposition. The galaxy had learned a simple lesson. Touch one human colony, and 700,000 warships would come for vengeance. Threaten human civilians, and face the united might of the entire human race. But humanity had learned something even more important. When they stood together, they were unstoppable. When they fought for justice, they could not be defeated. When they protected each other, they became more than the sum of their parts. The stars belonged to all free peoples now, and humanity would make sure they stayed free. As President Santos looked up at the night sky one final time, she whispered the words that had become humanity's promise to the galaxy. We remember. We protect. We never surrender. The memorial to Haven's Rest would stand forever, but more importantly, the unity it had created would endure, ensuring that no human colony would ever again face destruction alone. Humanity had found its place among the stars, and the galaxy was better for it.